John, you need to unmute. You need to mute yourself and informally welcome people that are joining us immediately on YouTube. Diego, would you mind confirming that we are on YouTube? John, you need to unmute. You need to mute yourself and informally welcome people that are.
Yeah, we're live on YouTube.
Thanks, Diego. And I've closed YouTube myself. I could have left it open, but I've closed it so that we don't have that happen again. With my voice coming from two places. I can see the strip of people along the side, which I don't think I could see last time, but I take it that can't be seen on YouTube. Is that correct, Diego?
Just checking 1 sec. Yep, it's only you.
Right, thank you very much. And we'll start in a moment. Good morning, everyone.
Shalom, everybody.
Please be aware straight away that you should stay muted because otherwise you will appear on YouTube. So,
I see.
All right, so stay muted. And that's the payoff for being in two places at once. If you don't mind, you can say hello before the service, but during the service, you should definitely stay muted because you'll pop up on the screen, even if you cough. Okay?
Nathan, do you want us to stay muted if we're taking part when we're taking part?
No, so when you're about to take part, you should remember to unmute, as I try to. I don't always remember. And then you will appear on the Zoom screen, and you'll also appear on the YouTube screen. And your name will appear as well if it appears on Zoom. So bear that in mind. And you could always change to first name only. That's up to you. And hopefully Diego's happy to keep an eye on the door and can admit people when I'm not quick enough.
You need to make me host or co-host, sorry.
We'll do that. There we are. That's it. Right, thank you very much. And good morning to everyone and Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to our service in which we will be commemorating the remembrance events of this week. We're going to begin on page 129 of Siddur Lev Chadash with Sabbath service number 5, Sabbath morning service number 5. So page 129. And we welcome those who are viewing the service on YouTube and also those who are viewing the service on Zoom. For those that don't have the Siddur, of course, there is a link in the e-bulletin, and you can also go to liberaljudaism.org and quickly find the Siddur there, an electronic version, which is free to download or access. And One more reminder before we begin. Those who are watching on Zoom, please stay muted unless you are actively participating, and that means reading Haftarah or reading the Torah translation, and that's Louise and Brian, and they know they're doing that. Everyone else should stay muted during the service. Ma tovo halecha Yaakov mishnotecha Yisrael. Ma tovo halecha Yaakov mishnotecha Yisrael. Va'ani berov chastacha Avo, esh bet betecha, esh tachave, el hechal kochecha, be'yiratecha, Adonai ahavti me'on betecha, umkom mishkan kevodecha, va'ani eshtachave ve'echra'a evracha, lifnei Adonai osi, va'ani tefilati lecha Adonai, et ratzon, Elohim berov chastecha, aneni be'emet yishecha. Source of light, of truth, and of the impulse within us towards justice and mercy. May this hour of worship be one of vision and inspiration. Help us to find knowledge by which to live. Let the words we speak enter our hearts and influence our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary in search of you or in need of comfort and consolation. May the offering of their hearts be acceptable to you, and may the words we utter here bear fruit in acts of kindness, peace, and love. And we can say together in Hebrew and then in English, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe. You sanctify us with your commandments and enjoin us to study your teachings. And staying muted, we'll read responsively, and I'm hoping that people are also singing along at home. With what shall I approach the Eternal One? How shall I worship the God of heaven? Shall I come before God with burnt offerings, or with yearling calves? Will God be pleased with thousands of rams, or with 10,000 rivers of oil? Should I give my firstborn for my transgressions, the fruit of my body for the sins of my soul? People tell you what is good, but what does the Eternal One require of you? Only to do justly and love mercy and walk humbly with your God. These are actions which bring benefit here and now, but whose full value can be measured only in the light of eternity. Honoring one's father and mother, acts of love and kindness, diligent pursuit of knowledge and wisdom, hospitality to strangers, visiting the sick, enabling bride and groom to rejoice, consoling the bereaved, praying with sincerity, and making peace where there is strife. And the study of Torah leads to them all. Let's say together, Eternal God, may the words of Torah taste sweet to us and to all Israel, that we and our children and all the children of your people may come to know you by studying Torah. We praise you, O God, teacher of your people Israel. We're on page 132, 132. Baruch she'amah v'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, המהולל בפי עמו, משובח ומפואר בלשון חסידיו ועבדיו, בשבחות ובזמירות, נגדלך ונמליכך, מלכנו יחיד חי העולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מהולל בתשבחות. And we'll continue reading responsively. Service 5 is the service with the least music, I'm afraid. Sing for joy to the Eternal One, you who are righteous, for the upright do well to give praise. Give thanks to the Eternal One with the lyre. Make music to God with the 10-stringed harp. Sing to God a new song. Play well with shouts of joy. For God's word holds good. God's every deed is done in faithfulness. The Eternal One loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of God's kindness. By the Eternal One's word the heavens were made, and all their host by the breath of God's mouth. At the divine command, the ocean waves rise, or gather instead in the vaults of the deep. Let all the earth revere the Eternal One. Let all who dwell there stand in awe of God, who spoke and it was, who commanded and it stood firm. Eicha ashir al yom v'layla, velohim hu yetzaram. Eicha ashir al shamayim va'aretz, velohim hu yesadam. Eicha ashir al harim u'gvaot, velohim hu tevaam. Eicha ashir al yamim vetziot, velohim hu cholelam. Eicha ashir al tevel umloa, velohim hu tivam. Ashir leyotze hakol, v'na'ale al kol, lelohim ashira. Hallelujah, 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 el bekocho. Hallelujah, hallelujah, bekia uzo. Hallelujah, 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 bigvorotav. Hallelujah, hallelujah, kebro kudlo. Hallelujah, 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 beteka shofar. Hallelujah, hallelujah, benevel vechino. Hallelujah, 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 betov umachal. Hallelujah, hallelujah, beminim ve'ugam. Hallelujah, 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 betil teleshama. Hallelujah, hallelujah, betil teletrua. Kol hanshamate hallelujah, kol hanshamate hallelujah, kol haneshamate hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol haneshamate hallelujah, hallelujah. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, האל המלך הגדול והקדוש, בשמיים ובארץ. כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו, ואלוהי אבותינו, שיר ושבחה, הלל וזמרה, ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בשירי זמרה. Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzei or uvorei choshech, osei shalom uvorei et hakol, hameir la'aretz veladarim aleha berachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh bechol yom tamid ma'aseh bereshit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam bechokma asita, mal'a haaretz kinyanecha. תתברך אדוני אלוהינו, על שבח מעשה ידיך, ועל מאורעו שעשית, יפארוך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, יוצר המאורות. Let's say together, still muted, in English. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching. Make us faithful to your commandments and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity. We praise you, O God. In love you have called your people Israel to serve you. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך. ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך. וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני Adonai Elohechem. Good and beautiful and true, sound, established and enduring are these words, now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha neda b'kodesh, nor tehilot hosef eleh. A new song the redeemed sang to your name at the shore of the sea. With one accord they gave thanks and proclaimed your sovereignty. Adonai yimloch leolam vaed. Tzur Yisrael, Kuma Bezrat Yisrael, Go'aleinu Adonai Tzevaot Shemo. Go'aleinu Adonai Tzevaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai, God Yisrael. On page 140, 140. Adonai sefatai tiftach, ufi yagid tehilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'emoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el hagadol hagibor ve'hanora, El Elyon, gomel chasadim tovim, ve'koneh hakol, ve'zocher chasdei avot ve'imahot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומשיח ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריח השמש ומוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישוע, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה המתים. We sanctify your name on earth, as in the prophet's vision the hosts of heaven sing your praise above, for so it is written, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Melech al haaretz kevodo. God's glory fills the universe. Baruch kevod Adonai mimekomo. From your concealment, majestic one, reveal yourself and rule over us, for you are our hope. Yimloch Adonai leolam, Elohai Tzion, ledor vador. Hallelujah. From generation to generation we will make known your greatness. To the end of time we will proclaim your holiness. Your praise, O our God, shall never depart from our lips. We praise you, Eternal One, the Holy God. You inspired our ancestors to hallow this day for your service. When upon its coming we pause to contemplate our life, we learn anew that we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for the Sabbath day and for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. May our worship today help us take into our hearts its message of holiness, and consecrate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and good. Yismechu b'malchutcha, Yismechu b'malchutcha, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg. Amekachesh Eveir, Amekachesh Eveir, Kolam Yisperu ve'yitangu mituvecha. V'hashvi, V'hashvi, Ratzit bo v'kiddashto. Chemdat yamim, oto kavrata, zecher lema'aseh bereshit. And let's say together in English, our God and God of our ancestors, may our rest on this day be pleasing in your sight. Sanctify us by your commandments and make us loyal to your teaching. Satisfy us with your goodness, gladden us with your salvation, and purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Eternal One, let the holiness of your Sabbaths enter our hearts, and may all Israel who hallow your name be exalted by its peace. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath. V'yitzei Adonai Eloheinu ba'amcha Yisrael, u'tefilatam be'ahava tekabel, u'tehi le'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha. Baruch atah Adonai, shotecha levadecha b'yirah na'avod. We give thanks unto you, Eternal One, our God, as you are the God of our ancestors. You are the rock of our life, the power that shields us in every age. We thank and praise you for our lives, which are in your hand, for our souls, which are in your keeping, for the signs of your presence we encounter every day, and for your wondrous gifts at all times, morning, noon, and night. We praise you, O God, source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due. Sim shalom tova uvracha. Sim shalom tova uvracha. Sim shalom tova uvracha. Sim shalom tova uvracha. 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 Sim shalom tova uvracha. Sim shalom tova uvracha. And at the very end of that passage, the Chatima, the seal of the blessing, in Hebrew and then in English. Let's say together, Baruch atah Adonai, Oseh HaShalom. We praise you, O God, the source of peace. For those on Zoom who would like to enter someone into the chat box that they're thinking of at this time who is ill, please feel free to do so now. And you can turn to page 607. those watching on YouTube will have to contact me in advance, I'm afraid, or and I may even send you the Zoom link. Give people a few moments. We're on 607. May it be your will, Eternal One, our God and God of our ancestors, speedily to grant a perfect healing of body and mind to Laura Heidemann, Jenny Taylor and Peter Levy, Sarah Kessel and Abigail Kessel, and David Tomlinson, and to all who are sick. We say together at the bottom again in Hebrew and then in English, Baruch atah Adonai, Rofei HaCholim. We praise you, O God, the source of healing. And if we need to, we can go back to page 146. Ose shalom bimromav, oyase shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol bnei Adam. Now, at this point in the service, I'm going to ask Jeremy to unmute himself, and we are going to have a short service marking the remembrance events of this week. I'm hesitant to say Remembrance Day because, of course, we mark remembrance on the second Sunday of the month, as we have throughout my life. But previously, we marked remembrance on the 11th day of the 11th month, which we've gone back to, and we're doing both now. And of course, the week after the main service at the Cenotaph, the Association of Jewish Ex-Servicemen and Servicewomen have marched for many years, the Ajax Parade. That's this coming Sunday. So whether we should mark remembrance on this Saturday or the one before is a moot point. We are doing so today. Jeremy is going to be reading from the Remembrance Service, which is to be found in the Reform Siddur. I'm afraid our Siddur is lacking in that respect, and what they have is very good. So there's no need to reach for it unless you really want to. Jeremy will be doing the reading, and some of the passages will be very familiar. So Jeremy, if you're unmuted, I'm going to hand over to you at this point.
A memorial prayer for Remembrance Shabbat. And we commence with that well-known extract from Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season, a time for everything under the sun, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to seek and a time to lose. This is the time to remember. November 11th was Armistice Day in 1918, the end of the war they called the War to End Wars. It did not end war. Countless other conflicts have happened since then, and many still die in war in our time. We remember at this time all who gave their lives in the service of our country, especially those who served in the 2 world wars, those who died that we might be free, those who died so we could live on. There were many who had the strength to stand up to evil, protecting others from its consequences. Their example is still our defense and our shelter. And the quote from Lawrence Binion, "They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them. When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today." God, full of compassion, whose presence is over us, may the souls of our brothers and sisters who gave their lives in war find safety and rest with the holy and pure on high, who shine as the lights of heaven beneath the shelter of your presence. Source of mercy, cover them in the shelter of your wings forever and bind their souls into the gathering of life. It is God who is their heritage. May they be at peace in their place of rest. And let us say, Amen.
Jeremy, thank you very much. And can I ask you to mute yourself once more, please? And we're going to have an abridged Torah service, as we tend to do. Sometimes we have the full service, but of course we can't have the full service as we would in the sanctuary. So we are abridging things more often than not, I think. But we're in the general area of page 481, so you may want to be there. We will say the prayer for the community a little later. And we have actually said the blessings around study, so I'm going to move straight to the Torah reading itself. And of course, quite a few people were in this morning's session run by our scholar in residence, John Heidemann, who gave a very good session on Philo of Alexandria and his reading of some of the verses that I'm about to read. And that is Genesis 23, verses 1 to 19. So Genesis 23, verses 1 to 19. I am going to endeavor to share screen when it comes to the Hebrew, and I hope that works. Louise is going to read the translation. So Genesis 23, 1 to 19. And having asked the Friedmans to mute themselves in a moment, I'm going to ask them to unmute themselves again and hand over to Louise for the translation, which we do first. And we've, as I say, we're not doing the full service. We won't have the Torah blessings. We've had the blessing for study. So straight into the text. So Louise, whenever you're ready.
The translation I'm reading from is The Living Torah by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. And Nathan has told you it's chapter 23, 1 to 19. Sarah had lived to be 127 years old. These were the years of Sarah's life. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, also known as Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham came to eulogize Sarah and to weep for her. Abraham rose from beside his dead, and he spoke to the children of Heth. "I am an immigrant and a resident among you," he said. "Sell me property for a burial place with you so that I can bury my dead and not have her here right in front of me." The children of Heth replied to Abraham, saying to him, "Listen to us, sir. You are a prince of God in our midst. Take our best burial site to bury your dead. No one among us will deny you this his burial site to bury your dead. Abraham rose and he bowed down to the local people, the children of Heth. He spoke to them and said, "If you really want to help me bury my dead and put her out of my presence, listen to me and speak up for me to Ephron, son of Zohar. Let him sell me the Machpelah cave, which belongs to him, at the edge of his field. Let him sell it to me in your presence for its full price as a burial property." Ephron was then sitting among the children of Heth. Ephron the Hittite replied to Abraham in the presence of the children of Heth, so that all who came to the city gate could hear. "No, my lord," he said, "listen to me. I have already given you the field. I have also given you the cave that is there. Here, in the presence of my countrymen, I have given it to you. Bury your dead." Abraham bowed down before the local people. He spoke to Ephron so that all the local people could hear. "If you will only listen to me," he said, "I am giving you the money for the field. Take it from me, and I will bury my dead there." Ephron replied to Abraham, saying to him, "My lord, listen to me. What's 400 silver shekels worth of land between you and me? Bury your dead." Abraham understood what Ephron meant. He weighed out for Ephron the silver that had been mentioned in the presence of the children of Heth, 400 shekels in negotiable currency. Ephron's field in Machpelah, adjoining Mamre, thus became Abraham's uncontested property. This included the field, its cave, and every tree within its circumference. It was Abraham's purchase with all the children of Heth who came to the city gate as eyewitnesses. Abraham then buried his wife Sarah in the cave of Machpelah field, which adjoins Mamre, also known as Hebron, in the land of Canaan.
Thank you very much, Louise. Here we are. ויהיו חיי שרה 100 שנה ו20 שנה ו7 שנים, שני חיי שרה. ותמות שרה בקריית ארבע, היא חברון, בארץ כנען. ויבוא אברהם לספוד לשרה ולבכותה. ויקום אברהם מעל פני מתו, וידבר אל בני חת לאמור, גא ותושב אנוכי עמכם, תנו לי אחוזת קבר עמכם, ואקברה מתי מלפני. ויענו בני חת את אברהם לאמור לו, שמענו, אדוני, נשיא אלוהים אתה בתוכנו, במבחר קבורנו, קבור את מתך. איש ממנו את קברו לא יכלה ממך, מקבור מתך. ויקום אברהם, וישתחו לעם הארץ לבני חת. וידבר איתם לאמור, אם יש את נפשכם לקבור את מתי מלפני, שמעוני ופגעו לי בעפרון בן זוכר. ויתן לי את מערת המכפלה אשר לו, אשר בקצה שדהו, בכסף מלא יתננה לי בתוככם לאחוזת קבר. ועפרון יושב בתוך בני חת, ויען עפרון החיתי את אברהם באוזני בני חת, לכל באי שעה יורו לאמור. לא אדוני, שמעני השדה, נתתי לך, והמרה אשר בו לך נתתיה לעיני בני עמי. נתתיה לך, קבור מתך. וישתחו אברהם לפני עם הארץ. וידבר אל עפרון באוזני עם הארץ לאמור, אך אם אתה לו שמעני, נתתי כסף השדה, קח ממני, ואקברה את מתי שמה. ויען עפרון את אברהם לאמור לו, אדוני, שמעני ארץ 400 שקל כסף, ביני ובינך, מה היא? ואת מתך קבור. וישמע אברהם אל עפרון, וישקול אברהם לעפרון את הכסף, אשר דיבר באוזני בני חת, 400 שקל כסף, עובר לסוחר. ויקום שדה עפרון אשר במכפלה, אשר לפני ממרא השדה והמערה אשר בו, וכל העץ אשר בשדה, אשר בכל גבולו סביב. לאברהם למקנה לעיני בני חת בכל באי שעה יורו. ואחרי כן קבע אברהם את שרה אשתו אל מערת שדה המכפלה על פני ממרא היא חברון בארץ כנען. And I wanted to bring one commentary to the verse which is likely to raise a smile, or raises all kinds of questions with the commentators who answer it in all kinds of ways. But there is this, is it meant that Abraham pays or not? He certainly feels he does. He feels it's meant. And this is from the Tannaitic sources. This is from the early rabbis, and it's actually from Avot de Rabbi Natan and the sayings of Rabbi Nathan. And let's see, it's a commentary on the verse, say little, do much. Say little, do much. And Rabbi Nathan, Rabbi Natan, says, how do we know that the wicked say a lot, and don't do anything at all? And he answers, for this is what we find with Ephron, who said to Abraham, a piece of land worth 400 pieces of silver, what is that between you and me? As if he was willing to give away the land for free, says the rabbi. But in the end, when Abraham went to give him the payment, it says, Abraham understood Ephron and paid him the money, and he simply accepted it. So I think we'll leave it at that. And I'm going to stop the share. And there we are. So at this point, I'm going to ask Brian to unmute himself. He is reading the Haftarah today, and I think he will be doing the blessings either side of it. It's from the first book of Kings, chapter 1, verses 5 to 31. So 1 Kings, chapter 1, verses 5 to 31. Again, because it's being read in translation, we can simply sit back and listen. We don't need to follow necessarily. So over to you, Brian.
A very few words about this Haftarah before I read it. It's quite interesting. First of all, it reflects that King David had 21 children, at least, of which the first 6 were by different wives. Then he had 5, including the first one that died by Bathsheba, and then 9 others by sundry other wives. And this story sort of reflects what might happen in such circumstances, and perhaps also relevant to this week. It has within it themes of ambition, hubris, power broking, and loyalty, all of which seem strangely relevant at the moment. So the blessing before, we praise you, Eternal One, our God, Sovereign of the universe. You inspired faithful prophets and took pleasure in the words they spoke in truth. We praise you, O God, for the gift of Torah, your servant Moses, your people Israel, and the prophets of truth and righteousness. Adonijah, incidentally, is the next son after Absalom, and not the child of Bathsheba. Now, Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith, put himself forward and said, I will be king. So he got chariots and horses ready with 50 men to run ahead of him. His father had never rebuked him by asking, why do you behave as you do? He was also very handsome and was born next after Absalom. Adonijah conferred with Joab, son of Zeruiah, and with Abiathar the priest, and they gave him their support. But Zadok the priest, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, Nathan the prophet, Shimei and Rei, and David's special guard did not join Adonijah. Adonijah then sacrificed sheep, cattle, and fattened calves at the stone of Zoheleth, near En-Rogel. He invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the royal officials of Judah. But he did not invite Nathan the prophet, or Benaiah, or the special guard, or his brother Solomon. Then Nathan asked Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, have you not heard that Adonijah, the son of Haggith, has become king, and our Lord David knows nothing about it? Now then, let me advise you on how you can save your own life and the life of your son Solomon. Go in to King David and say to him, my lord the king, did not you swear to me your servant, surely Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne? Why then has Adonijah become king? While you are still there talking to the king, I will come in and add my word to what you have said. So Bathsheba went to see the aged king in his room, where Abishag the Shunammite was attending him. Bathsheba bowed down, prostrating herself before the king. What is it you want? The king asked. She said to him, my lord, you yourself swore to me your servant by the Lord your God, Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne. But now Adonijah has become king, and you, my lord the king, do not know about it. He has sacrificed great numbers of cattle, fattened calves and sheep, and has invited all the king's sons, Abiathar the priest and Joab the commander of the army, but he has not invited Solomon your servant. My lord the king, the eyes of all Israel are upon you to learn from you who will sit on the throne of my lord the king after him. Otherwise, as soon as my lord the king is laid to rest with his ancestors, I and my son Solomon will be treated as criminals. While she was still speaking with the king, Nathan the prophet arrived, and the king was told, Nathan the prophet is here. So he went before the king and bowed with his face to the ground. Nathan said, have you, my lord the king, declared that Adonijah shall be king after you, and that he will sit on your throne? Today he has gone down and sacrificed great numbers of cattle, fattened calves and sheep. He has invited all the king's sons, the commanders of the army, and Abiathar the priest. Right now they are eating and drinking with him and saying, long live King Adonijah. But me, your servant, and Zadok the priest, and Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and your servant Solomon, he did not invite. Is this something my lord the king has done without letting his servants know who should sit on the throne of my lord the king after him? Then King David said, call in Bathsheba. So she came into the king's presence and stood before him. The king then took an oath. As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble, I will surely carry out this very day what I swore to you by the Lord God of Israel. Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne in my place." Then Bathsheba bowed down with her face to the ground, prostrating herself before the king, and said, "May my lord King David live forever." For the Torah, for the privilege of worship, for the prophets, and for this Sabbath day, which you, eternal God, have given us for holiness and rest, for honor and beauty, for all these we offer thanks. May all the living come to praise your name forever. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath.
Rabbi Nathan, you're muted.
Oh dear. Well, sorry about that, everyone. Thanks, Diego. I'll just repeat that. Thank you very much to Brian, who has muted himself as I forgot to unmute myself. And I did wonder, as we prepare to read in an abridged Torah service, the prayer for the community at the bottom of page 484, whether Lena would like to read. Your name is on the screen, Lena, but if you don't mind that, and you'll appear on YouTube, give me the thumbs down if you do mind, or the thumbs up if you don't, and you'll right. So you'll unmute yourself and you'll read bottom of page 484, and then on to the next page.
And you're unmuted.
Okay.
Eternal God, as you blessed our ancestors in generations past, bless now this congregation, the leaders and its members, and all who enter the synagogue to meet, to study, and to pray. Comfort the sorrowing hearts among us and heal those in anxiety or pain. May we all find here community and friendship, renewal of purpose and hope, a deeper understanding of our heritage, and a sense of your abiding presence. Bless all congregations of the House of Israel throughout the world. Let those who live under oppressive rule soon be freed, and may we all unite to witness your truth and do your will.
Thank you. If you could mute yourself once more. That's it. You mute, Lena, and that's it. Thank you very much. I'm sure we all said amen. And we'll turn to page 489, 489. Behold, a good doctrine has been given you. Do not forsake it. It is a tree of life to those who hold it fast, and all who cling to it find happiness. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Ashirenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Hadeshamenu kekadem Hadesh Amenu And the gates clunk and people take their seats and all those things we once did and will return to doing soon. Please God. Something I did last year from the pulpit was to read from the history of the synagogue in relation to what happened at Prentice Road between 1939 and 1945. And I propose to do the same again, but to read from both histories. There are two histories. The first, which I'll hold up, the South London story written by Sidney Rich, and the second, updated by John Rich, well, the South London Story, a brief history of the South London Liberal Synagogue, the South London Liberal Synagogue, not the other one. And this is the 75th anniversary edition. and that's from 2004. Now, actually, the John Rich edition came earlier, but was updated itself by Cedric Briscoe, former chair. So it's interesting. I'll start with the later one, and then I'll read the earlier one. And quite a few of the details, they're quite different. They tell us more. So I'm going to read both. So there was a lot of information to draw on, and each writer, John Rich and Sidney Rich, drew on or chose to present things slightly differently. But they both come together to give us a good idea of what was happening. I don't think there are too many liberal synagogues that can talk about what was happening there during the war. The liberal movement is a young movement still, and I think it would be a handful that were already in existence when the war came in 1939. Of course, we'd been in existence for 10 years or so, and in the building for perhaps a year. I'll start, therefore, with John Rich. The congregation had hardly settled into its new home when war broke out. For a short time, the basement hall, then the Lily Montagu Hall, now the Jane Levy Hall. Of course, the Lily Montagu Hall is now above ground and was once below ground, was taken over by the Royal Air Force. Now, I'd forgotten that myself. That year, 1939, no eve of Rosh Hashanah or Kol Nidre services were held, and the services on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur drastically shortened. Some council members and many ordinary members were evacuated. The afternoon Sabbath services were held at 2:30 p.m. so that everyone could be home well before blackout. The religion school closed, but parents were urged to enroll their children in the Liberal Jewish Synagogue's correspondence classes. Even the elections for officers at the annual general meeting were suspended. For a month, the Ner Tamid youth group ceased its activities, but was soon running 6 meetings a month on a somewhat reduced membership. The discussion group and the study group still met, and congregational life soon recovered from the initial shock of the declaration of war. In the spring of 1940, the congregation was trying to acquire a second Sefer Torah, preparing for the communal Seder, and even trying to restart the religion school, if it were found that there were sufficient children still in London. In fact, the religion school was not reopened until September 1942, with Samuel Rich as principal and Mary Rich as an assistant teacher with a roll of 21. Later in 1940, the synagogue was slightly damaged during an air raid, but not sufficiently to cause cancellation of services. The Liberal Jewish Synagogue St. John's Wood had been seriously damaged some weeks later, and a letter had been sent offering our congregation's great regret. Very little of the terrible events that occurred between 1939 and 1945 appear in the minutes of the Synagogue Council. Services continued fortnightly on Saturday afternoons. Financial crises were overcome. Communal sederim continued to be held, though with some difficulty. In 1943, Samuel Rich was absent from the AGM through illness and missed the preceding service. It was the first time ever that illness had prevented his taking the service, a remarkable record in 14 years. The war did take its toll among our members. In April 1942, Harry Salter, son of Vice President Adolf Salter, was killed on active service. In October of the same year, gunner Jack Goldston, a leading member of the Ner Tamid Youth Club, was killed in action in Libya. In June 1943, Officer Cadet Desmond Marks died in India. Before joining the army, he had been training for the ministry and would have become our first homegrown rabbi. The synagogue library was named in his memory. In July 1944, Lawrence Goodwin died as a result of enemy action, one of the many victims of the battering that South London took from the V1 flying bombs. The congregation had weathered the war and now had over 370 members. Increasingly, new families had joined to help in the work started by the Briscoes, Bennisters, Civils, Salters, Kennedy Lees, Levers, Riches, Kelf Cohens, Kerwins, Golds, and others. There were the Taylors, the Isaacs, the Harts, the Ashers, the Nobles, and many others serving on Synagogue Council, the Women's Society, the Ner Tamid, the House Committee, and doing the 1,001 jobs which were needed to maintain a community. Samuel Rich still led them, as he was to do so for the next few years. So that's in the first history. Oh, sorry, that's in the later history, I beg your pardon. And now from Samuel Rich's son, Sidney Rich, we'll see what he adds, misses out, I suppose. A couple more paragraphs only. By September 1939, the country was at war, and a large proportion of the members were evacuated from London. Religion classes were perforce suspended and were replaced by correspondence lessons conducted by Mr. S.M. Rich. So they didn't stay at the LJS for too long. We put on our own correspondence courses written by the founding minister. Those services continued. Those who remained grieved grieved at the poverty of attendance and the absence of the children. The synagogue itself could not be used after the hours of darkness because of the blackout regulations, and even the perpetual light had the warden's instructions to be extinguished. But the light of faith and the love of our synagogue still burned in the hearts of those who remained. Let us be profoundly thankful that it was so, and salute their faithful work through the darkness of those terrible years of war. And most of all, our founder, Samuel Rich, who was at one period in those days minister, secretary, treasurer, and teacher. And these years were by no means inactive. The services, discussion group, congregational Seder with record attendance, youth group and monthly bulletin continued, and a Bible appreciation group meeting weekly was added. The religion school reopened in September 1942, as we heard, and continued thereafter without a break. Each year, some of our young people were confirmed at the Liberal Jewish Synagogue, and the war was not over when on April the 29th, 1945, Rabbi Dr. Israel Matuk conducted the first confirmation service to be held at our synagogue. The confirmees were Norman Civil, Leslie Kennedy Lee, and Lizelot Singer. Finance was a grave concern in those war years, and much credit for the careful husbanding of our resources and the introduction of the covenanted subscription is due to the late Mr. S.I. Herbert, who, in the absence of the treasurer on war service, assumed the work as financial secretary, a position he held from 1941 to 1945. And then there are some more financial details, which I think I'll leave on Shabbat. And finally, it says, on May the 13th, 1945, a large congregation gave thanks at a special service for the cessation of the war in Europe, and over £100 was collected as Thanksgiving offerings. And there we are. So it's a reading from our own Torah, if you like, our own story. And I hope that was of interest to people. And I was actually talking to James, and I was walking with Rabbi Danny Rich yesterday, and I talked to him about it too. We found a photograph of one of the four who were lost in the war, and Jack Goldston, and we placed it by Desmond Mark's photograph in the library, but we don't have photos of the other two. We thought it would be nice to have a memorial to them, a plaque with their photographs and maybe a little bit about them. And that's something for us to talk about as a synagogue and as a council, because as I say, we are in the position of being old enough to record members who were killed in the Second World War. At that point, I'd like us to turn to page 520 for Elena, as we begin to conclude the service. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, אשר שם חלקנו לייחד את שמו, וגורלנו להמליך מלכותו. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, המלכים. הקדוש ברוך הוא, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ, מושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת עוזו בגופי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו, אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת, אין עוד. Trusting in you, eternal God, we hope soon to behold the glory of your might, when false gods will vanish from our hearts, and idolatry cease forever. Help us to perfect the world by bringing it under your unchallenged rule, when all will invoke your name, relinquish evil, and turn to you alone. May all who dwell on earth come to know that to you every knee must bend and every tongue swear loyalty. Before you, let them humble themselves, and to your glorious name let them give honor. Let all submit to your sovereign rule. May that time come soon and last forever. For ultimate sovereignty is yours, and to all eternity you will reign in glory. As it is written, the Eternal One shall reign forever. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. And as I prepare to say Kaddish with you, if there are names which you know are not going to appear in the synagogue's own list, but you would like mentioned, as we did earlier, if you'd like to put them to those on Zoom into the chat box on Zoom. Thank you. It is hard, I beg your pardon, I'll go with number 5. We're in service number 5. We're on page 523. Life is finite. Like a candle, it burns, it glows, it is radiant with warmth and beauty, then it fades, its substance is consumed, and it is no more. Yet we do not despair, for we know that we are more than a flickering flame. With our lives we give life. Something of us can never die. We move in the eternal cycle of darkness and light, of death and life. And as a synagogue, at the South London Liberal Synagogue at this time of year, we remember in particular Byron Darley, mourned by our former rabbi, Janet Darley, Judith Gordon, mourned by Ruth Taylor, Iris Proops, mourned by Rosalind Brandon, and Irene Friedman, mourned by her son, Jeremy Friedman, and the Friedman family. We also remember Jack Shaposnik and Fabri's mother, Louisa. Zichronam livracha, may their memory be an abiding blessing. As perhaps we all name in our hearts our loved ones, we can certainly think of the 4 members of the synagogue named earlier. we pray that the divine presence will comfort us and all who mourn as we turn the page and say together, Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ba'alma divarach yotei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'v'yomechon, v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'gala u'vizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehe shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithada v'yitale v'yithalal shmei kudisha berichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiran ba'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehe shalom rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. V'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol b'nei Adam, v'imru. Amen. And let's see. A few announcements. After we've had a Don Olam and a concluding blessing, I will turn off the YouTube stream, and those of us who are over there in YouTube will come to Kiddush, hopefully. And those who don't know how to come to Kiddush, you'll have to get in touch. We'll ask one or two security questions, and then you can have the Zoom link and you can join us for the service on Zoom, or come in for Kiddush on Zoom. Some people prefer YouTube, even if they have the link. So announcements-wise, Havdalah is at 5:30 tonight, a little bit later than the United Synagogue we know, but we're going to be consistent through November because it's less confusing. 5:30, so not that far away really. Have a nice afternoon. Before you know it, we're back in this place. And tomorrow is Gesher. I'm not sure whether there are any Gesher parents with us today, but tomorrow is Gesher. It starts at 9:45 on Teams, which is another Zoom-like thing, platform. And then it continues on Teams for most people, apart from the KT class, because I'll teach them on Zoom. I can only take so much in terms of platforms. So tomorrow at 9:45 assembly, and then 10 o'clock Gesher, our Cheder, our religion school, starts on Teams and Zoom. So it's hard not to think about the situation we find ourselves in and reflect on what the synagogue had to do in much worse circumstances, of course, for a much longer period. But we're having to be creative too. So no correspondence classes, but we are meeting on Zoom and YouTube and Teams. And we have a WhatsApp group for the coffee morning and so on and so forth. It's our version, I suppose, of what they did then. On Monday morning, we have Shacharit at 8:45. And on Tuesday evening, we have our Tuesday evening, we'll have to give it a name, but we have our Tuesday evening. That's all I can say at the moment. From 7 until 8, there's Hebrew. Intermediate Hebrew, that class is called Bev's Boys because they all are. But if you want to join and you're not, we'll change the name. And I'll be teaching beginners between 7 and 8. And then from 8 until 9, we have a Judaism course, which at the moment is discussing prayer. And it's meant to give everybody a good overview and be of interest no matter where people are on their journey, so to speak. And then that's it until the Thursday. On the Thursday, we have the coffee morning. That starts at 10:30. That's in this space on Zoom, which is coordinated by Peter, who's over there on YouTube watching right now. And very nice it is too. So come along. This Thursday coming up, there will be a virtual tour of Jaffa. And there'll be lots of conversation as well. So that's at 10:30. No Friday night next week. Back on Saturday morning. And I think that's it. So let's conclude with a Don Olam on page 525. Adon Olam Hashem Alach B'terem kol yetzir nivra Leit nasa v'chevzo kol Azai melech shemo nikra Ve'acharek yichlot hakol Levado yimloch mora Ve'hu haya ve'hu hove והוא יהיה בתפארה. והוא אחד ואין שני, להמשילו להכבירה, בלי ראשית, בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמשרה. והוא אלי וחי גואלי, וצוחב לי בעת צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא. בידו אפקיד רוחי, בית ישן ועיירה, ועם רוחי גביעתי, אדוני לי ולא יירא. And at the bottom of page 530. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'emotenu, baruchenu b'bracha hameshuleshet haketuva b'Torah. Our God and God of our ancestors, bless us with the threefold benediction of the Torah. Yivarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha. May God bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. May God look kindly upon you and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God reach out to you in tenderness and give you peace. Shabbat shalom. And that brings our YouTube